This video is going to be about constructing and testing the validity of conditional statements. So here are some examples of what we're trying to get to. So the statement, all animals are dogs. So we would write the statement, if a creature is an animal, then it's a dog. We're putting it in a specific format, but we're saying the same thing. Okay? Or, all dogs are animals. If a creature is a dog, then it is an animal. Notice the relationship between that green and that red statement. Notice that they're kind of flip-flopped. That's going to be super important as we do what we're going to do today and then the next video. So we're really just going to go over how to construct statements in this one. So we need to have some vocabulary. A statement is a sentence that is either true or false. It's like flipping a switch. It can either be true or false, nothing else. We usually represent statements, so we don't have to write the sentences out every single time. We write them with just a letter, P or Q. So P would be the statement, a rectangle is a quadrilateral. A negation of a statement has the opposite meaning of the original statement. So it's represented using a letter such as, now notice this little symbol in front. That little tilde means not. So we would say that as not P or not Q. We make a negation by adding or removing a not phrase from the statement. So this statement here, this would be considered not P because it is a rectangle is not a quadrilateral. It is the negation of our statement P. Next, we have what's called a compound statement. Now this is an English term that you learned when you're forming sentences like around 4th or 5th grade. So you use the conjunctions and or. So we have the statements P, a rectangle is a quadrilateral, and Q, a rectangle is convex. The statement P and Q would be a rectangle is a quadrilateral and a rectangle is convex. Notice how I joined the two statements using that conjunction. We could do that also with or. We would say a rectangle is a quadrilateral or a rectangle is convex. Here's a little video. If you remember back in the day, Schoolhouse Rock.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses. Conjunction, junction, how's that function? I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done. Conjunction, junction, what's their function? I got and, but, and, or, they'll get you pretty far. And, that's an additive, like this and that. But, that's sort of the opposite, not this, but that. And then there's or, O-R, when you have a choice like this or that. And, but, and, or, get you pretty far.
Okay, so that was just a little example of your conjunctions and how they fit together. So and means that both are happening, or means you have a choice of this or that. And we really won't use but when we use our conjunctions. That's not going to be one that we use in our statements. We're actually just going to make the negations of those statements. Okay, so we have some symbols that you guys need to know. When we have just our letters, that means just the statement. So statement P, statement R, statement T. We can use any letter that we want to. So when we're building these statements, we have some symbols that we're going to use for shorthand. That way we don't have to write out full sentences all the time. So if I give you something in symbols, you need to know what that means. So here, this little arrow means implies. So we might say P implies Q, and we'll talk about what that means in class. We already talked about what the tilde mean. It means the negation, so the opposite of that statement. The little caret the little top hat, means and, so that's our symbol for the conjunction and. The little V, the little upside down top hat is or. So notice the difference. We have the top hat and the valley means or. The little 3 dots means therefore. So when we're writing proofs in shorthand, we might see those 3 dots meaning therefore. And the double-sided arrow, it doesn't mean a line like it would when we're talking about geometric figures. When we're talking about statements, it means the phrase if and only if. So when we talk about a statement, it would be like P if and only if Q. And we'll talk about how to build those statements and what those statements are in the next video. All right, so we have these statements, P, Q, and R. And I want you to pause and go ahead and attempt to write these statements. These are the answers to those statements. The symbols, remember the upside down V is and, the negation is that little tilde, and the V is or. Next we're going to talk about conditional statements and what they are. A conditional statement has a certain format. It is an if-then statement. So when we have our statements P and Q, we'll write them in the form if P, then Q. Now, what this means is if that first statement happens, it's implied that Q will happen. So we have what's called the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the hypothesis is the first part of that statement. So the hypothesis is P, and the conclusion is Q. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on identifying pieces of statements. So here we have the statement. If you have no more than 2 absences and a B average, then you can exempt your final. So we want to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of this statement. So we're going to highlight the hypothesis. Notice I'm not including that word if. It is not part of the hypothesis. It's only the phrase that's after that. So it does not include the word if. Notice the conclusion is after then. You can exempt your final. So the hypothesis is you have no more than 2 absences and a B average. You can exempt your final is the conclusion. Okay, rewrite the statement below as a conditional statement, and then we're going to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we have a car with poor brakes is a menace on the highway. So it'd be a good idea to identify the 2 pieces of this statement first. So the first part of this is a car with poor brakes. The second part of this says it's a menace on the highway. So where you would want to actually start with this is with the hypothesis and conclusion. So we have a car with poor brakes and a menace on the highway. So the hypothesis is our if part. The conclusion is the then part. So now we're just going to put them together. If a car has poor brakes, then it's a menace on the highway. And that's how we construct the conditional. All right, again, if you have no more than 2 absences and a B average, then you can exempt your final. The if part is not included. The then is not included. It's just the phrases that are after those. We're going to work on constructing conditionals and identifying parts when we get to class.